this specially scheduled Shelburne Select Board meeting of Tuesday, December 18th, 2018, which we now call to order. And the first item to be considered is to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Mary, seconded by Jamie. Any discussion? Any discussion?
If I may, we have a request to add a quick item regarding a loan for a wastewater tanker truck that needs to be approved before the end of the calendar year, if you please.
Any objection on anybody's part? We'll consider that a friendly amendment. And where would you suggest that we?
It could be at the very end if you wish.
Between 8 and 9?
Sure.
Wait, is somebody going to
Could
be
go.
sitting here waiting to present?
Peter will be here. and
Anyway,
he
for
will
9,
He will be
yeah.
here to speak to it, so.
Is that wastewater tanker truck for the waste department or the fire?
It is not for fire,
Okay,
it's for the town.
thank you.
No, that's what I'm suggesting, between 8 and 9, because Peter will be here for 9, as it is. Okay?
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. Colleen Parker is not attending this evening and will not be voting. The next item is to approve Select Board meeting minutes of December 11. Neither Colleen nor I will be voting on these since neither of us were present for that meeting.
I've reviewed the minutes, Mr. Chairman. I have no changes to make to the December 11 meeting minutes that were prepared.
Mary move.
I have an extremely important change to be made. Under item 14, adjournment, it says the meeting was adjourned at 9:34 when it was adjourned at 8:34. And so I don't want to miss the recognition of
Good job.
Let's just say there were a lot of smiles that evening, so it was.
Yes, I mean, that's an important.
It's not believable.
You're
It was
welcome.
8:30.
A milestone,
Thank you,
A milestone.
indeed.
for recording our triumph.
Good catch.
Take that as a friendly amendment to the motion to approve.
So Mary moves and
Second.
Jamie seconds. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. Again, two of us not voting for reasons of not having been present. The next item are the December 13 minutes of the special board meeting regarding budget.
I move to approve the minutes as drafted.
Second.
Seconded by Jamie. Any discussion?
That's right. No, I would just, I realized that I had only skimmed it earlier and I hadn't read it in detail, but I will be happy to accept the thorough examination of my members and not worry about
I
it.
would agree, it
I
was a
can-
lot to take in. I think this can be taken out of context a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think
I
all in
mean,
all,
like,
it's better to
if-
sort of have
Yeah.
more than less under
I
the
agree. No, I think,
circumstances,
and I
so.
think I'd like to say that I think you did an amazing job on this.
So with credit to Lee. Is that a second? Seconded. Any discussion? Any discussion in the public? Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And again, two of us, myself and Colleen, not voting for reasons of not having not been present at the meeting. The next item on our agenda is public comments, which ordinarily we would initiate with Ruth.
So, hello. Okay, so not really much has happened this week that you can really see. The steel continues to be put up, so the outline is filling in, and Town Hall they're continuing to work on. Let's see, this is Tuesday. So a week ago, Monday, the soil testing contractor came and took samples along the north side of the site where the stormwater trenching is going on. The state requested that he do that. The samples came back on Friday. They all came back clean. So this is good news. And basically all we can do is just keep waiting for the state to tell us where else they might like us to sample and then what mitigation will be. So that's some progress. We were told this morning that basically the guys and ladies will be on the site throughout the holidays. They get Christmas Day off and New Year's Day off, and that's it. So, well, they might get the afternoons and the eves off, but, So, come by and see it and have a happy holidays, unless anybody's questions. That's great, okay, all right, thank you.
Ruth. Linda?
Linda, you up here?
Oh, got a handy one.
That one's not on.
Not on?
Okay,
Oh, this one.
well, so much for that.
Linda Reel, Falls Road. 2 meetings ago, there was quite a long discussion about the complications at the library town center project, and we haven't heard anything more about further complications or thoughts on how to deal with the $200,000+ price tag, and I would just like to hear some news on that. Thank you.
So I'll take that. Since that last meeting, there have been no further complications encountered. As Ruth noted, the soil testing's come back clean on actually 2 separate occasions now, so that's good news on that front. Some of the expenses can be handled with the contingency. The town has a $68,000, roughly speaking, contingency built into the budget. Many of the complications related to the front porch, the cupola, and some of those other items can be managed within the existing contingency. We'll not use it all up. As we had outlined at that meeting, it still leaves us with $100,000 plus that we still need to find a home for, if you will. The good news is it's less than the total that was. The bad news is it's still a significant amount of money that we have to find a home for. Hopefully this year's operating budget will come in well under, if we're lucky, and we may be able to cover it directly that way. It's partly, we know it's out there, but partly it's a wait and see how the budget goes and what other sources might be available to help cover that. So I hope that helps. It's the best we can offer at this time.
We will be considering in the 2019-2020 budget as well, some funding potential. So we're really in the process of coming to some conclusions there. But thank you for asking, Linda. Any other questions? Any other comment? The next item is Select Board comments. Josh, you want to lead off?
Sure, I'd like to give an update. Last week, we talked about scheduling a reception to honor the new town manager. And the feedback I've gotten from a number of people suggests that a Saturday afternoon in January may be an appropriate time. And with probably in this space, with meeting room 1 and 2, with some refreshments, but not something terribly extravagant. And so with
Potluck. Potluck.
Oh, there's an idea too.
that's
So
an idea.
we will, I'll continue to utilize people. There have been a number of people who have volunteered to help plan, which I really appreciate. And so hopefully I'll have some more detail by the next meeting, but I really would appreciate any comments or suggestions that anybody might have, so.
Great. I was not able to comment earlier, but I think it's a great idea. I really think it's a super idea.
Very nice.
Yeah, so let us know what we can do. Mary?
My only comment is, of course, I had the pleasure of spending 8 solid hours in this room on Thursday with my colleagues, Jamie and Josh and Lee. I left with a headache, but I also left with newfound appreciation for the town in which I live and the employees of our town who have worked so hard to carry out their tasks with such dedication, and the same can be said for the volunteers in this town. I'm looking at John and Ruth, and I just really wanted to let the public know what great work these people do, how hard they work, and how inspiring it was to listen to them all day long. It was an unexpected, sort of heartwarming and uplifting experience for me, so just wanted to share that with everybody.
Thank you. Jamie?
I concur. I mean, the level of preparation is always phenomenal. I wish more people could see it. It's one of those where it'd be nice to put it on VCAM. I know it's 8 hours, and it's a big chunk of time, but there's a lot of content in there that is not necessarily reflected in the public document. So besides that, happy holidays to all.
You know, second, both of those notions, happy holidays for sure. And second, I had it's not quite I wouldn't call it a benefit, because I would much prefer to have been here, but I had the advantage of some distance from that process, and to read it quietly in some detail. And I've already commented to Lee that I thought it was just an extraordinary effort on the part of town staff and CVCs. So that's a very high-quality piece of work. And we have progressed, I think, in the past several years with some new approaches and ideas about budget. They're beginning to tell in the amount of information that's being communicated. And I was especially pleased to see the reactions, the responses to the +3, -3, and 0, which could easily have been gamed and easily have been discounted as perhaps not as important as I think they are. But on the contrary, were very thoughtful, very carefully worked out, and very professional responses. So I join all of us in thanking staff and appreciating Lee's leadership in this regard. So, any other comments? The next item is, I don't think Jim is Jim there? No, I don't think Jim's here yet, is he?
He is planning to be here.
Okay. Why don't we move on to the,
Town manager report? Town manager report?
Okay.
You thought you were gonna get to slide on that, didn't you?
I knew someone
town
would catch
manager
it.
report? How possibly can we have overlooked that?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like
Thank
to
you,
echo,
Barry.
I'd like to thank the Select Board, the citizens who come here every Tuesday night, and the entire town staff. It's an amazing group of people, a lot of hard work and dedication, and the many volunteers who help this town run, the boards, fire, rescue, many others. It's a pretty amazing crew all around. I'm grateful to be a part of it. Thank you.
Wouldn't be a fun meeting if we didn't slip one of these items at some point, would it? So, we still don't have Jim, so in this case, with everybody's
Brady?
agreement, why don't we, do we?
Are you saying, is it Jim Bringen?
Yeah. Why don't we move on to number 8? Do you want to, Jamie, take the lead with this?
I'm happy to. Do you have any
Sure, I can.
preliminary remarks you'd like to?
So as each of you know, we've had presentations, we had some informal meetings. The town plan hearings are coming up in January and February with our hopeful goal of adopting it before it expires in February. So the thought tonight was just to lay out a rough game plan or strategy, whether you wanted to dive into pieces of it tonight, how you might like to consider the plan. Do each of you wish to take on one or more chapters that you would offer to do a quick overview at a subsequent meeting? Do we just launch into it together? I mean, probably the easy and typical approach is chapter by chapter, and you get a sense of what's new, what's different, what's changed. Or there may be a whole different approach to it. The public hearings, of course, need to be just those, public and open to conversation, but the practical reality is, Planning Commission spent 1.5 years on it, you've seen it, you've had some informal conversations, and just want to help create a useful, effective strategy that helps us move forward appropriately.
Yeah, so Jason Grignon, the chair of the Planning Commission, had reached out to me and asked what's the most productive way to go about this. So without having answers yet, I thought the time tonight would be best spent having a dialogue around the board's preference for how we should
tackle this. I have the luxury and the benefit of being very familiar with this document from my time on the commission, and this was very much in process. So my thought is, I like the idea of dividing and conquering, just given how much content there is for us to tackle in a couple meetings. I also like the idea of trying to prioritize sections, and not necessarily going sequentially. This is sort of set up chapters 1 through 10 in the way that the statute for comprehensive plans is set up. So I think we can take this in a different order, and sort of develop our own priorities, just knowing that we'll probably have more energy up front, and we should tackle the sections that have changed the most from the current plan, which are going to be transportation, energy. Housing's one that I know has been updated somewhat substantially, and then I think natural resources would probably be after that, and we can reconfirm this with the Planning Commission, of course. We don't have, I know they do have, because the structure and layouts change so much, a red line won't really be available to us, but I know they do have backup if, for example, if we want to take one section and look at just how much has really changed against the current plan. So those are my initial thoughts on how we should think about this. Between the 5 of us, I think we can each take 2 chapters, 2 sections, and take the lead that evening and point out, key themes, priorities, things that we think as a board we should be talking about. I don't really endorse a page-by-page approach of this, just because I don't think it's the most productive use of the board's time, and I have a very high level of confidence in the time spent by the Planning Commission. But I do think we need to take our time to go through it and make sure that we support the policy directions that are articulated in here.
So the sense of it is we might each take a small number, do a very brief review, and then look to each other for threads and cross currents that run among all of the topics, and or some larger effect on town future. That seems to me to be a very, very economic and efficient way to deal with it.
My sense is there's going to be a lot in here that's not very controversial. It's going to track the current goals and objectives of the current plan. But I do think there are a number of sections that I just identified that, and maybe, I know you mentioned an executive summary would be beneficial. Maybe we can ask the commission to just, for that handful of sections, maybe not the entire document, but to at least sketch out an executive summary or some themes that
In effect, a
we should be,
same kind of a
exactly,
review,
something
yeah.
similar to help guide our discussion.
I'd be happy to review 2 chapters, whichever are assigned to me.
Which ones would you prefer?
Introduction and prologue.
I thought you might say index.
Telecom facilities is pretty short, too.
Index doesn't count. No.
I'll take whatever is assigned. I wouldn't mind growth and development.
Okay.
But anything else is fine. Maybe whatever people think, maybe I'll do energy, since
I
I've
think that
been
would be a
sort of
good
the
one.
solar
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
contact.
Yeah.
That
That'd be a
would
good one. Josh, you got some ideas?
I can do natural resources. And I don't know. And maybe future land use. How's that?
Good, chapters 1 and 2.
Jamie?
I'm happy to do any. I don't know if you have any preference, but
How about housing and transportation, since you said those were among the ones that were substantially?
yeah, they are. So I can take both of those,
Yeah.
unless you have, Jerry, I know
No,
housing is,
no.
no? Okay.
I'd be happy to, do you want to you want to append towers and telecommunication facilities, Josh?
To append?
Yeah,
Do
to
it
your
also.
two?
Not necessarily. I mean,
That's
It's
2
short.
pages and hasn't, I don't
really
think
short.
anything's
Okay.
changed in that
Oh,
one.
it's just 2
I could be
pages.
wrong,
All
but
right.
it's,
You can do it.
it's
All right.
essentially the current,
All
it's the current telecom
Too
plan
bad, Josh,
section,
you missed
so,
out. I'll
Oh,
put my
wait,
name
wait,
down
wait,
for
wait,
that.
wait, wait, Colleen's not here.
Yeah, but
right.
So we
Colleen's
need
not
to
here.
assign her
The
the longest one.
No, I
So-
thought Colleen might want to take on,
Jesus, I've taken the 2 longest ones.
Colleen may want to
Energy
take
will
on
be a
historic
big
and
one.
cultural resources and childcare. That's not,
Okay.
that's a
Who-
pretty
Another
Who
2
took,
important.
who took growth and development? Did you do that,
I
Jerry?
did
Oh, Mary did,
No,
good.
growth and I
Mary.
took energy.
And then
Alright,
I'll
good.
do the Parks and Rec.
Okay.
And if
So
we have
who-
second thoughts between now and
Yeah, that's fine, we can
next week, we can
swap
you
out.
exchange
Can
those.
you
and-
run them down again? I lost track.
All right, I've got Josh for chapters 1 and 2. I've got Colleen for 3 and 7. I've got Mary for 4 and 9. I've got me for 5 and 10. And Jamie for 6 and 8. And 11, we have
That's just a
left
one-pager.
to,
We don't really need to do
yeah.
that.
Okay. Excellent.
no, I think maybe we would be indebted to you, Jamie, if you would also take on kind of the overview. Maybe deal with the executive summary so that so that those are in alignment. Their executive summary and our kind of bottom line understandings and appreciation.
I
Make some
will-
sense?
I will do that and invite Jason
Sure.
to help us structure that, and maybe Dean would be willing to sit in on these, hopefully.
Would we do this on the 8th, Lee? Is that the,
That would make good sense to do that on the 8th.
so we should be
At
prepared
least
to.
start to have these conversations.
Would it be okay for us to share these by end of the first week of January, so all of us have seen
Share which?
just the little reviews that we're gonna do? Just
Oh,
nothing formal, but just, so at least we have some idea of, amongst ourselves with you.
the first public hearing, do we have the date for that?
Yes.
Dean's here, 22nd.
January 22nd is the first hearing.
So we really only have 2 meetings, right?
We have 3 meetings in January.
Right.
The 8th, 15th, and
15th and
22nd.
22nd.
The
Yeah.
15th will be the budget hearing.
Right.
Among other things.
I think we have to be very efficient with
Yeah,
this
yeah.
pre-review prior to the public hearings. I don't know if we're talking about 2 hours maybe total between the 2 meetings, or, Right.
Depending on what issues
Yeah.
are surfaced,
I
I
mean,
think
it's
that's
a-
certainly achievable.
Well, I
Yeah.
think that's probably one of the things we're gonna learn, whether there are overarching questions or
Right.
issues that need some expression, or whether not. I think that'll help us a lot in terms of how the 8th progresses.
since Dean's here, Dean, the section, you may have not been here when I said this, but the sections that have changed the most are what? Energy, transportation, housing,
I would say the land use section. is
Land
sort of
use.
the- yeah,
the future land use? Yep. Okay.
What we've, I'm sorry, Dean, I neglected to see that you were here, but
just to
He just popped out.
Another meeting.
what
Yeah.
we've done is distributed chapters amongst ourselves. And we've donated 2 to Colleen. And these we will review in some detail ourselves and then summarize. And Jamie's going to act to deal with summation of the summaries. And that's sort of what we've been discussing.
I think our goal needs to be surfacing any issues that might throw a curveball during the public hearings. Dean can sort of speak to the exact statutory language, but once the public hearings are open, we can make changes, but I think if they cross the threshold of substantive changes that change the concept or sort of fall into that bucket of these feel like substantial changes and it needs to be rewarned, and then all of a sudden we're off track to meet that deadline for adopting a new town plan before the current one expires. Any thoughts on that
Yes, that's essentially the bottom line. I had looked at a calendar, which unfortunately I don't have with me, and satisfied myself that there are a few days following the 22nd that changes could be made to the document, and basically a refreshed version of the notice for the second hearing could be issued, and everything could stay on track. But if those changes are not made within that small period of time to allow the notice to be issued 15 days before, then there would have to be a new notice
Okay.
beyond that date.
So we have a little bit of cushion, but not much.
No.
I think, for me, I think it would be helpful if we agreed on some structure on which this summary should happen. So we're all essentially doing the same thing for each section, and so whatever we produce in written form has a similar feel to it. I'm not sure the best way of establishing that. I don't know, maybe Jamie, could you, since you're most familiar with it, you might want to suggest, or not necessarily now. Yeah, I mean.
No, I know,
yeah,
I'm
but
not trying to do it in real time, I'm trying to think of what that summary is going to do, like what sort of the.
Right, and the objectives of this, what do we want to accomplish, what do we want the essence of that summary to do to help us with our evaluation?
I'd be glad to put some thoughts together, run them by you and see how,
That'd be helpful,
just to help
to get your
think about a
take on-
format or a structure, so,
Yeah.
as you say, there's some consistency, but we're clear in that efficiency piece of it. If there's key issues, let's make sure they are raised right up front. Let me think about that, I'll run
Yeah,
something
it's-
by
it's
you,
tricky. I
talk
mean,
to
this is
Dean,
one
see
where
what.
it's challenging to try to
Summarize?
Yeah, that's why I was thinking,
All of this,
if everybody
so-
does it in a completely different way.
Yeah,
it's-
there's also an element of everybody needs to really roll up their sleeves and sort of do their own work on this. I mean, I hate to put it that way, but there's a sense of this, it's a collective review at some level, but it also really has to be done outside of board meeting time, because it's just not realistic to think we can get through a collective review in real time of all this. It's a lot of content. So my thought is we have 2 hours that we need to figure out what's the best use of that time before the public hearing. And more will come out in the public hearing, and as Dean said, we have, if things do look like the board directionally wants to make changes, there's a little bit of cushion if we want to do that once we're in the public hearing, but it'd be great to surface issues during this next couple hours of review if we're able to.
And so the issues, given how much the effort the planning commission has put into this, are you anticipating both legal issues or functional issues for the select board?
My sense is it will be more policy direction,
Okay.
whether it's looking at objectives that you may not support, right? You may have a couple that say, hey, this just doesn't sync up with where we should be going with respect to energy. Maybe it's sort of a growth rate, right, that's captured in here. And in the past, there's been some disagreement over things like that, right? Growth rates, where board members have different views on how much development there should be in certain parts of the town. I don't know. Beyond that, it's a tricky one to try to jam this much content into a real-time review, so.
Well, my sense would be that consistency would probably be the most useful initial measure. not only internally to the document from chapter to chapter, but consistency with our operations and activities. And then the next obvious issue would be implied or actual policy. As we understand it, in our immediate role. I mean, that speaks to our very purpose. And I think we should be comfortable and would want to express that comfort to the community that we're being looked to in this plan to accomplish certain policy goals and at the minimum, consider them. And we should be comfortable that in anticipating that job. So, and then I suspect there'll be some questions about one area affecting the other. And so we'll have some interchanges amongst ourselves, but, so you'll give us a little guidance, Lee, in terms of a uniform,
Put some thoughts
response.
together, run it by you, see what you think.
yeah,
Try to help
yeah,
give a format and a structure to that.
yeah. Does that, Dean, does that sound like a doable, workable? Pardon me. Okay? What's that?
Sounds good, thank you.
Okay. Jim has arrived, so without further ado, we will ask him to
Thank
make a
you.
presentation to us on the Hague Award.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
How are you doing tonight?
Good.
I know it's a busy time of year, so I'm gonna try to make this quick. Okay, so, last month, Jerry, asked me to chair the Colleen Hague Public Service Award. I was, given the honor of being the inaugural, recipient of the award. I have to say, it's one of the highest honors of my life. So I really appreciate the opportunity to continue serving the community around this award. Jerry tasked me with developing a process for a committee independent of the select board to solicit nominees, review those nominations, and identify who next year's award winner would be. So I'll just go through this document real quick. There's a couple extra copies that folks in the audience can get after we're done. Quickly about the award itself, the town of Shelburne established this award after Colleen Hague retired in 2016. They put a call out for nominations in late 2016, early 2017. There have been 2 awards granted, and we're hoping to present an award at town meeting in 2019. I've asked 2 outstanding individuals to serve on the committee with me. You all, I hope, know Bud Ockert, who is on the Veterans Memorial Committee and also coordinates the Memorial Day commemoration every year. I've worked with Bud for at least a decade through the Scouts. And also through the Scouts, I got to know Lisa Merrill, who was the Boy Scouts treasurer for several years, and she's also a board of trustee, library board of trustees, a member. 2 outstanding individuals that I'm really looking forward to working with them. They've both given me feedback on this document and on the process itself. This is not in stone, of course, that we can tweak this just a little bit. So the idea here is that this isn't a committee that just stays the 3 of us. The last thing I want to do is to add yet another committee or commitment to my life. The idea here is that we will ask the 2019 awardee to serve on the committee, and one of us will step down. I'll probably stay on just to continue the process. So the committee will always be 3 individuals. And the award process, we'll announce the award on, we'll put out a call for nominations on January 7th. We'll send out frequent reminders, and then the deadline will be February 11th. So there'll be more than a month for people to submit nominations. And we will review those nominations between February 12th and the 24th. And we will work with Vermont Trophy and Engraving to have the trophy and plaque developed. I spoke with them this afternoon. They're well aware that we want to do this, and they say that this timeline is very reasonable for them. And then on the front page, I robbed from the Select Board's website, and I also looked at the original criteria, and I'll let you read this yourselves, but we have sort of parsed out this statement and basically really given people an understanding of what the committee is looking for. And all of those 4 bullets are further fleshed out in the portion that's not emboldened or italicized. And then we'll be asking for nominations to be submitted electronically via email. I just developed a email address today. All 3 of us will have the password to it. We'll all have access to it, and we'll be looking for people to provide endorsements in the newspaper and Front Porch Forum. But we want nominations to come through email. That was quick. Did I miss anything? Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
How are you going to advertise the process? Through Front Porch Forum?
Yes, we will release basically a press release to Front Porch Forum on the 7th of January, and also we'll submit it to the Shelburne News for its publication on Thursday. So those are the two means we'll be using. We're hoping that the Select Board will also mention that at their few meetings during the time when the nomination process is open. And take any input you have for getting the word out. One more?
Yeah, no, I love the idea of the rotating committee. I
Yes,
think that'll
thank you.
be well received.
Jim, is there gonna, I'm sorry. Jim.
No, it's okay. My last comment was I only raised this because I want to make sure that it's as accessible as possible with the email submissions. If someone does happen to not be
Have
comfortable
email?
with email or on a computer, I assume we can figure out a way for a written.
I'll work
Nomination,
with
whether
them.
it's
I've got a
through-
scanner, I
Yeah.
have access to a scanner if someone wants
If
to
they
send in a
mailed it to
letter.
you, I'm sure it
We
will
can
be.
do that as well. I
Okay.
can just
Yeah,
scan
we
it
just-
and send it in via email, but this is a way to make sure that all the nominations are in one
recorded.
place. Yeah, and recorded, yes.
And will those nominations be accessible to all to see who was nominated?
I'm gonna have to talk to the committee about that.
I think it's something we might need to keep in mind if this is a town committee.
I mean, this is the same
Because it's
issue
gotta
that
be a
we-
public record,
Yeah,
I think. I don't know, this is,
Well,
it's a
it's
little
not-
off the reservation a little bit, because it's an award process, but if it's I don't know if this particular committee is subject to the open meeting law where all records are
I
available.
mean, this
should be
is the
made
issue,
available.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay.
No, it's the issue I brought up last meeting, is that if this is not a constituted committee, in the same way the other committees, town committees, for example, we're not participating in the naming of the members of the committee, then, in a lot of ways, it's like other, I have a concern about procedurally sort of developing town committees that are associated with the town, that are potentially going to spend town money, but there's really there's no formal connection to town policies or processes.
How would you improve what Jim has proposed?
Well,
And the town will pay for the award, so.
correct,
Yeah.
but since this isn't all other committees in the town are appointed by the Select Board, and the Select Board has some authority there. In this, essentially, we've given away that authority, And so in the same way, I'm truly asking these questions because, as Mary brought up, okay, since it's not an official committee of the town, is it subject to open meeting law? And I don't have an answer to that. But I think it is, in the same way that it was brought up last week with the Village Safety Committee. It's not an official committee, but it was submitting a budget request. All right, so all of its meetings are not subject to open meeting law. And I just have a concern that if this sort of can snowball to the effect of we have lots of committees that are making recommendations that fall outside of the normal town procedures.
Well, I think, returning to the issue of public presentation, it seems to me that in the process of choosing an award winner, there will be a deliberative occasion that will be closed, as it would be in our own case. So
That's correct.
I think the question is, between now and then, between now and at that point, would there be value in publishing a list of those
I'm
who
not
have
saying
been?
publishing, I don't think it needs to be
Oh.
published, I'm just suggesting to Jim that hold on to the emails, they might be subject to
Yeah,
requests
so-
for information. I don't think that necessarily
Yeah.
this particular group should have to publish all the names at all.
Well,
But I think my only concern is that the committee understand that it's operating at the request of the select board. And I think for that reason, it would be important to keep in mind that it could be subject to the rights of the
Yeah,
Municipal
that it has certain
Administrators
responsibilities
Procedures
and-
Act, and
yeah.
please hang on to all
Yeah,
those
yeah.
emails. You mentioned a password, and I understand that in a process like this, there's some degree of discretion is necessary, and you're making sort of you're making a judgment call based on the criteria of the ward and who the particular nominees are, and it can become somewhat, as we actually all well know, a little bit of a delicate process. So I'm just saying that when you mention the emails and a password, I get all of that, but someone could request that data, and that data should remain available and not be destroyed is all. That's my only point.
I'm not so sure, Jim, you might not want to, in fact, consider carefully, I use the word publish, but to make public better, because simply a nomination is a credit and an earning on the part of anyone in the community, of which they can take great pride. And even for purposes of convenience, that rather than have duplicates or triplicates, or, here are the current nominees, might be a very good step, just to simply, make public the list of nominees, recognizing that at a point in initiating the decision-making process, that you're going to do that in a deliberative way.
Well, I can certainly bring that back to Bud and Lisa and
Yeah.
ask for their.
When you
opinions
meet
on
and
that
see
as
what
well.
they think. And,
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
yeah.
And can I just say one more thing? Thank you for putting this together. Thank you for agreeing to do this, and also, I think, asking Lisa and Bud is really very nice choices.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Super.
I'm happy they said yes.
Yeah, good for you. Lee, you have any comments?
Thanks for taking the lead on this. It's great. I think it's great that we reactivate this and get it rolling, and I think you're the right person to help get it
Thank
back
you,
on
Lou.
track.
I appreciate that.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Jim.
much.
Thanks much.
Have a happy holiday and
Yes, sir.
happy New Year.
You too.
Yes,
Thanks for
sir.
coming.
Thank you.
Peter, we moved the item that you requested regarding borrowing authorization to 8A, and that would be now.
apologize for not getting this to Lee in time to get on the regular agenda, but it is a rather routine item that we do from time to time. The issue deals with financing the purchase of a tanker truck in the wastewater department. It was purchased back in 2015. We find the best rates to finance this type of equipment is to go out each year for a one-year note, borrow it for 1 year, pay down a portion of the principal the following year, and renew it again. So we're in about the third step of doing that with this particular piece of equipment. When it was purchased, it was about $145,000 in 2015. So we've been doing that cycle of borrowing and paying down and renewing from there. So this is one of those, another step of doing that. We'll be paying down the principal by about $14,000 and renewing the balance for $101,500 with a one-year note with Bank of Middlebury at 2.39%. So the board's just asked to approve that. There's some documents that need to be signed, and then we will be back again next year, paying it down again and renewing it one more time. So.
Do we do the 1 year term because of the rate directionally has been going down?
The one-year rates have been lower than the
Yeah.
longer-term rates. I mean, we have gotten bids for financing over 10 years or 5 years, and interest rates have been creeping up, so that strategy may need to change at some
Yeah,
point.
that's why I raised it.
That's
That's
gonna
what
unwind,
happens.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, a year ago, we were under 2%, so these were very attractive loans. Now this
Yeah.
one's up over 2% slightly. I still think it's better than a longer term. If we were to lock in a rate for 2 or 3 years, say, to complete the financing, it would probably be a higher rate than what we're seeing right
Yeah,
now.
but we'll need to, right, based on the balance? Or we'll
But
be able to pay down the balance?
we'll
in a
be
year.
renewing it, and then the question will be, will we go with a one-year term like we're doing have been, or would we go longer term? Get quotes on what the rates would be and pick the best, which would have the best scenario.
Did you look at that, Peter, for this year too, and still conclude that a 1 year made sense?
Yeah, there's not that many banks that'll finance longer term. I certainly don't want to go with a bond bank or something like this. So for the short-term nature of highway trucks, vehicles like that, several banks, it's pretty competitive for banks to bid on that. Longer-term notes, not that many of them will do. But as we go along, watching the interest rates come up, we'll try to get quotes for that option as well.
Thanks, Pete.
You got a prepared motion for us to?
Peter prepared one, if you're so inclined.
I am inclined. Move to approve a 1 year loan with National Bank of Middlebury in the amount of $101,500, an interest rate of 2.39% to finance a wastewater tanker truck purchased in 2015.
Second.
A second from Mary. Any further discussion? Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you, Peter.
So if I may, there's 3 separate places, if each of you would be so kind to sign. We'll take care of that from here.
While we do that, do you want to introduce the budget review?
Sure. So as Mary mentioned, we had our all-day budget hearing last week, and the array of department heads and committees presenting their proposals to you. The hope for tonight was to begin an initial review somewhat similar to what we just talked about with the town plan, in the sense of taking a broad brush overview, trying to highlight some key issues or concerns that we may have. Peter is going to help lead off with a brief overview of what the chair has euphemistically called the nut, the key financial obligations we have as a municipality that must be honored for next year, whether it's existing debt or other matters. And then from there, we'll figure out just what might be achievable and affordable overall for next year. But for tonight, if we could help to sort of look big picture, overview, what might be our tolerance for an increase that we feel both reasonably handles the needs of the town and is something the taxpayers might be able and willing to support.
Might have,
Sorry?
what did I do with my handout? Yikes.
Which,
I don't think I have that.
No, this is brand new,
No.
so.
We haven't.
We don't have it?
No,
we do not.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll lead off with that, and then again, talk big picture, broad brush overview, and see where we might land. Ultimately, we'll be warning the budget hearing for January 15, but we do have tonight and the 8th to continue informal conversations before we get to the formal hearing that ultimately, and if we need another meeting, not that anyone wants more meetings, but if we need one, we'll find a date that we can schedule that.
So following up on what Lee just mentioned, this is just a brief summary of what kinds of things are in the budget that we have little, if any, control over, before we add in the other items that you heard about last week when the department heads were meeting with you. And rather than just focusing on, I mean, the total budget is up over $1 million, but that doesn't mean it's over $1 million in taxes. What you really want to focus on is what's the change in the property tax going to be, because that's what drives your property tax rate increase. So the version that we went through last week, which is draft number 1, is by no means final. We will be looking at every line item from now until it has to be finalized. There's a lot of other areas where we'll need to spend some more time to fine-tune the numbers. But the version that we started with had a property tax increase of $709,000. And as Lee mentioned, there are some things in there that we have to do. And it's not by no means an exhaustive list, but at least starting out with some of the kind of things that we will have to do. Salaries and benefits. We do have a bargaining unit agreement with the police department and emergency dispatch that will be in place for this project, for this budget year. The contracts there call for a 3% increase in the bargaining unit pay rates. Our practice has been a 2% cost of living increase for non-bargaining unit employees. That's obviously not mandatory or required, but if you're increasing salaries for one group of employees and not for another, obviously there can be some concern amongst the staff in that sort of situation. So basically the salary increase that would drive the bargaining unit obligations, and assuming a 2% cost of living for non-bargaining unit, would be $119,000 if we implemented that plan. Along with that, benefits. In some cases, the police bargaining unit is increasing their contribution for health insurance depending upon the plan that's chosen. So there's a little bit of a savings there. And the non-bargaining unit, following the same practice that we have in several years where depending upon the plan they choose, there's either a premium contribution or not. Our Blue Cross premium increase came in at about 5%, which is better than what we've seen in the past. We've been through years where it's been 10% or more. So that's an increase, but again, not a substantial increase as we've seen in the past. Again, just looking at that increase and the scenario of profile of employees that we have, it's about a $27,000 increase. Again, that's a number we'll be fine-tuning, making sure that we've got the right profiles, family, single, that sort of thing, to make sure that we've got the right assumptions in there. The debt, the library debt is obviously a big piece of that, but we also have a number of other loans that are actually coming down in payments. The way the bond bank, where we finance long-term projects through, you pay down a portion of the principal every year and pay interest on the balance. So as you're going through the amortization of a loan, the loan payments actually decrease. So while the library we're projecting, and this is, again, we need to check in terms of what current rates would be, in terms of what we're financing there, about $116,000 annual payment, again, subject to double checking and some more analysis. But at the same time, we have other loans that are going down in payments by about almost $20,000. So the net increase in our debt at this point in this draft is only $96,000. Increase over what we have in this year's budget. So that's $242,000 of items that increases for the next budget year that we didn't have in this budget. We also, sure.
So that's just the interest, correct?
That would be total debt service, principal and interest.
Okay.
Yep. On the revenue side, you recall that the board agreed with the Water Commission to transfer the cell tower revenue, the revenue we get for leases of cell towers that are on our water department tanks, to reduce that so that eventually the water department would get the full benefit of that. And that is in the last step of happening in this budget year coming up. That's a $20,000 reduction in what we were getting for cell tower revenue. It was over $100,000 at one point, and it's been ramping down. So that would be a revenue decrease of $20,000. So taking all those together, that's about a $262,000 impact on the tax rate of the total $709,000. And again, there's more areas that we can look at to fine tune. This was sort of a broad brush look, but just to give you an idea of where the increases are, how much are hitting the tax rate that are new things and how much are things that we have to do. Didn't really have a chance to look at maintenance costs. At this point, we've level funded those kinds of things. But again, when we re-examine utility maintenance and things like that, there may be other items that would be, again, in the category if you have to do. So this is just a first look at it. Some of the good news, we got our insurance renewal from VLCT. That's over $100,000 premium that we pay every year, so it's a significant part of the budget. The first time since I've been here, there's been no increase. I'm not sure if that's why Jerry's on the board. If we can attribute that to him, but the league had a pretty good year, so they did return, which they will do from time to time, depending upon their performance. They will return revenues to offset the premium increase. This was not a Shelburne-only phenomenon. It was pretty much across the board. But again, really good news because we've seen some significant increases on our property casualty insurance, and there may even be a slight decrease in it, but no increase at this point. The Chittenden County tax that we pay that supports the court system, sometimes we've seen $10,000, $20,000 increases in that. That came in, at least the draft. I know they've got a public hearing coming up on their budget, so it's not finalized. But the initial estimate they gave me was only about a 1% increase. So that's, again, something that was good news in terms of not putting extra pressure on the tax rate. Still waiting for the Green Mountain Transit budget, because as you know, that's a big part of our budget as well. I contacted them to try to get an idea of what their increase might be. I haven't received information back on that. I may try to get information from our reps on that board. But it's a $105,000 budget, so again, an increase on that can be significant as well. So that's just a brief intro of the kinds of things that we're seeing that can affect the tax rate that we have little control over, that have to be done each year. So if there's any questions on that. Or
Peter, I don't understand when you say property tax revenue increase. Can you explain where that $709,000 is coming from? How that increase happened? Is it something we voted on? We're going to ask for the public to vote for, or is it just because of increase in home values?
Well, when we put together the budget, we obviously look at what the expenses are by department. We went through that last week. And then we look at the revenues, because we have a significant amount of revenue base. So the difference between the expenses in the budget and the non-tax revenues that support that, whether it's fees or whether it's grants or that type of thing, if you do the math and subtract the expenses from the non-tax revenues, this version of the budget has a $709,000 balance that needs to be raised by taxes. So it's expenses minus all the other revenues, grants, et cetera, whatever's left over, that's what you have to raise in taxes.
So, yes, that's what we, yeah, okay.
And that's actually on the version of the budget. If you look at the, if you have that version on page 1, the very first line, taxes, penalty, and interest, you'll see $709,000.
Yep.
So in order to balance the budget,
In order to balance it, that's what you need to raise.
at this version. Obviously, we'll be bringing that number down.
And that
to
would
the-
be a 10% tax increase? Or
11.
is that just?
in that
It's just
range,
the
yeah.
It
Yeah,
would
the
be, well, that's the change, but that
change.
doesn't translate into a 10% tax increase. does
It would be based on what the grand list is. We would have to,
Oh,
you know,
we
do an
have that.
estimate on that.
Yeah, we did have that.
That's all.
It's 15 grand, 15 million, sorry.
I think it was about our draft was indicating an 10.9% tax rate increase to fund that 709,000.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Also, I had another question. Is it the case, I'm a newbie here, so that's my excuse, but
No.
is it the case that every community has to pay funds to the Green Mountain Transit Authority? Is that how that works?
The communities that it serves, yes.
It's a lot.
I believe that's a town vote to do that, or to join the Transportation Authority.
Yeah, I think that was an interagency agreement at some point,
Yeah.
yeah.
So if you have GMTA service, then it's likely you'll be paying for that. I mean, in some cases, maybe for a trial basis, they would do it, but then eventually, if it's a longer-term service, that community would be supporting their budget.
So that's a really helpful starting point. Thank you, Peter. And from there, it lands back on us to figure out how much we wish to drive down that $709,000 increase, and then how and where we do that based on. So the budget that we looked at last week was what you might call an unedited rough draft. It included every department or committee's recommendations or proposals. It seemed premature for us to do any editing at that point. Now it's for all of us to figure out what we do with all that.
In the sort of big picture here, has anybody heard any rumblings about the education budget and potential increases in education budget? What, because that's always,
Yes.
our portion is, what, 20% usually.
Right.
So I think in the big picture, it'd be somewhat helpful to sort of know that additive part.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard anything.
I haven't heard any rumblings yet either, and it's that constant challenge that you're absolutely right. The municipal portion of the total tax bill is a small fraction of the total, so I'm not advocating for it, but even if we went forward with this budget at 10 or 11% increase, it's 10 or 11% of the 20% of the bill. It's not the total tax bill jacked up by that amount.
Right.
But we don't know what will happen on the educational tax rate yet.
But here's the problem I see is that we
Still a
have
lot of money.
262,000 that we can't do anything with. We have to
Right.
live with that.
Right.
So that's getting up on close to half of that 709. So if let's say we said, 709, we can't justify sending that to the taxpayers to vote on, let's cut it in half. Well, that would leave us about less than $90,000 of extra revenue to fund everything else that people are asking for. Am I following the bouncing ball correctly?
And I think that's the right way to look at it, is sort of get an idea of how much, we have to decide how much of an increase is acceptable. I think last year, we were in between 4% and 5%, something like that, is that?
Yeah, I think, my sense of it at this point is that this is the town manager's product. And he and Peter will gain greatly from guidance from us at this stage, which should take the form, I think, tonight of an acceptable increase for working purposes. There's surely no appetite on anybody's part, I'm certain, for 10 or 11%. But we could agree tonight on a number that gives them, as the people who are developing this budget, some initial guidance. Secondly, that number does not include increases that either any of us individually or as a board may think critical. And while they wouldn't warrant status as a must fund, there may well be items that we think should be funded in competition with other items presently in the budget. And that would introduce our next set of tasks, which is to gather up all ideas for potential funding, and then look at what the demand is and how much cutting then has to be done from there. I think our goal is to get the information to Lee and Peter about how much has to be cut, and by our next meeting, and have them work on some preliminary ideas of where those cuts are going to come from. I've encouraged Lee not to adopt the tried and true percentage reductions across the board, because I don't think that type of incremental budgeting is very efficient, and I don't think it generates the best use of money. That means, however, a lot of additional work to take a variety of item requests, some new, some old, some legacy, some thought up over a period of years and which show up routinely, and decide among them, and I don't do this, John, for any reason other than the example of Ruth and yourself, but there may well be a fire department request of X dollars, as there is a trustee's request of X dollars, and we're going to have to sit and provide some guidance to Lee and Peter of this, which of those survives. So it will take a lot of careful review and work on our parts, but my sense is tonight, if we can give Lee and Peter a signpost, what we think is acceptable, and certainly with an understanding that we're not anticipating greater increases than that, then we can be about the business of helping them fine tune. Make sense?
That would be very helpful.
We did, my early thought to Lee was maybe 5 to 6%, recognizing that we do have some extraordinary, this nut is a little larger than normal and usual, there's no reason to point a finger at any particular item, but this is a little larger than it was last year, Josh, when we arrived at the similar.
Right.
Yeah, which we knew. Which we knew because
Yeah.
of the bond debt.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, it's
Yeah.
Which
Surprise.
I don't think necessarily means we increase our spending by that. In fact, in some ways, this suggestion means maybe we have to tighten our belt
Absolutely.
more
Yeah.
because of that extra
Yeah,
spending.
I think the mode is cutting. I don't think there's any mistaking the approach from here on out, which is cutting, not adding. So, but that, I think it's worth exploring with everyone who's requested funds, staff and CVCs, is that there's benefit to some relative cutting. In other words, some things are more important, we think, to the town future than others. And rather than drop everybody 10%, we're willing to cut out one item altogether in favor of another item of a similar dollar value. And that's a process that is very lengthy and detailed, and I'm not sure how best you want us to be at that, Lee. You want us to submit some ideas to you between the holidays that you and Peter can?
Yeah, I mean, certainly if there's any key issues that stand out that you are able or willing to speak to this evening, if you want to communicate with us individually as to key issues or priorities that you feel are mission critical, that we should.
I'll be happy to
Put
start off.
less attention
I've got
to-
one very definite one, which is to increase, because the town manager sets compensation to the degree that we budget for it. we have some influence on that. But I do have, as something I would like to see personally, are some increases in two specific departments in terms of compensation. Two heads. That's off the top, something that I think I would be happy for all of us to consider. And all of us may have similar ideas, which we need to pile on here, so we,
That's going in the other direction, right?
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
So,
So that we start off with the universe of what we think we really want to see, and cut from there.
all right, so do we have a number that, I can't remember what the, of what would give us 5%, what would be a dollar a figure that would lead us to a 5% increase?
Well, I'm gonna assume, Peter, wouldn't, if we took half of the expenditure increase, that's gonna drop it to close to 5%, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it was a 10% increase, the version that we passed out,
That's
so,
10 point, well, more closer to 11, I guess.
yeah, 11, 10 and a half.
I think we're looking at a magnitude of 500,000. We're talking about serious money. That has
Of
to be
decrease.
reduced, yeah. But I think the benefit to them is to give them the ideas now rather than later.
Mhm.
What we think we'd like to add to this, so that we're dealing with one pot of wish, whether must-funded or wishes.
Well, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying, is, it's all right, we've got this, we got this amount that is, potential increase, but, we've got to cut a whole lot out before we get to the point of increasing anything.
Well, no doubt, and some of those wishes may just simply not be granted, and
Mhm.
that's all. But I want to be sure we all have the opportunity
No, I agree.
to chime in with what we think.
Adjustments.
And not necessarily have to go find the money for it, but end up with a figure, and then we work from there.
And as you know, then by charter, a proposed budget has to be delivered to you by the end of the calendar year.
So the time
So-
is, but that doesn't necessarily mean the final, that just means.
Correct.
Yeah.
We have to deliver
Yeah.
a document to
Yeah.
you that will be the subject of
Yeah, yeah.
warned hearings and further discussion.
Now, I guess my sense, gang, is that we are gonna need to spend some time between the holidays, individually, scouring and suggesting and asking. I'm sure we can depend upon Lee and Peter in terms of what might be delayed a year. For instance, could the Irish Hill path project be delayed a year?
Well, those are helpful
Those are
questions
questions.
to ask. They're certainly questions we might ask, and we can
Yeah.
look into those.
I think we have to be cognizant, though, that debt service is going up next year. And so this is a concern that seems to be slapping me in the face, in that, yes, our expenses are up this year, but they're gonna be up even more next year. And so we always get into well, can this be deferred? Can that be deferred? And,
Well, you're right, because we got a 20 grand item for window repairs
Mhm.
that might have been 8 when it was obvious the windows
Correct.
needed repairing.
and how long has that been?
And now it's 20, and that isn't all due to inflation. That's
Right.
just deferred maintenance, so,
So, and
Yeah.
that may be one way to look at this, is that our approach may be to focus on things that have been deferred for a long time, things that
Yeah.
have been missing, rather than things that, that would be nice.
that may be new items, just don't
Mhm.
get the support from us, that strengthening things like the trail maintenance just some pretty routine, mundane things should get the attention because they've been maybe potentially neglected. So it may be one of our cuts individually and as a group is what is new and proposed that just simply, this isn't a year that we can do. That may be one, one approach, but I think if they went home tonight with some guidance about what's acceptable at this point as a working number, just as guidance, they'll refine and no doubt,
Right, and, well, for us, that we
Yeah.
would have to work within that
exactly.
number as well.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I think, if I'm understanding page 2 of Peter's revenue and expenditure summary, the tax rate hike that was passed by the board in 13-14 was 2.8%, 14-15, 2.9, 15-16, 0.9, 16-17, 3.4, 17-18, 7.7, and 18-19, 8.2%.
That's more than I remember.
Which
Is that right?
percentages were you looking at?
I'm looking
She's
at the
reading the
bottom
tax rate
line.
percent
Oh, the
change
tax
from
rate.
the prior year, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a trend that I don't think most people want to see extended.
Nope.
So I just don't know.
So, yeah, that's bigger than what I remember.
I'd like
Yeah.
to know what happens, Peter, so you have the library in there, and that's plus 116,000, and then pay down, so you get to 96. And that's a nut, and next year, do we know what that's gonna be?
As high,
If not higher,
Higher.
right?
you know.
Yeah, there'll be another, the budget year following this one will have another increase.
And then we go down from there, but at the same time, we're talking right around that same time of dealing with the wastewater treatment plant consolidation, although that's not gonna show up.
That would be on the user fees, that wouldn't be
Yeah,
on,
it's on
but
just
it's
the
still an
user
increase,
fees, right.
obviously, but not
More
a tax
people,
increase,
revenue
property
per
tax
salary.
increase.
Right. Yeah. But there are still other things down the road that are gonna, so the library will go down, but I think other capital expenses necessarily will go up because we're putting things off. I found the police department and dispatch's presentation about having better security in this building, having cameras. To me, that's, and I'd rely on the officials in the audience or maybe even at the table. To me, that's something that's, gets to the point where it's almost negligent not to have those kinds of things on your building. So to me, it's almost like a duty that we can't ignore. And that was a pretty big expense. To me, I don't recall any others that hit me the same way, like, oh, that's a must-do. The less lethal force is another one.
I think several of us have agreed that you had the benefit of the
The
total
presentation,
review.
yeah.
But the replenishing the open space seemed to be something that I think most of us were agreed to. So this may be the most important next step for us, which is to just jot down what
our
we think are pronounced
What our
Okay.
our
preferences.
priorities.
Yeah, our priorities.
That would be very helpful
Yeah.
guidance for us.
And where there's a kind of a consensus, that'll help, but just simply identifying will help. And then, I suspect we're all gonna be on very similar pages there.
That would be very helpful for us.
And we want to do that on the 8th? Sorry, I'm
We've
gonna
got to
sneeze.
do
Well,
it before. we have to have it
Ideally, we'd love to receive that
In the next week or so.
in the next week or so, so that we could start to fashion a new version of this budget that has smaller numbers attached to it, to deliver to you by the 31st, knowing we're going to continue to discuss and refine.
So you're looking for a list of specific cuts?
Or
Proposed
ads.
cuts, or
Well,
ads?
That's an ad
cuts
from
hold-
this document.
Yeah, I mean, probably
Version 1.
cuts,
right?
holds, and adds. Maybe there's some
Whatever.
things that you think are just okay as they are and you don't want to see any changes. You may have some things you agree are necessary to add, and you may have others that you're asking us to find a way to take out for this
Yeah,
year.
and I'm not so sure it wouldn't be wise of us, most helpful of us if we did it by item rather than cutting, although there may be some items that we think could be cut in half with a significant savings, but
What do you mean by item?
by item, in other words, as Mary's referred to the security, the several security requests, as I've referred to the several compensation increases, as others might, rather than adding 8% to this and 14% to
Right.
that kind of thing. If we keep it at a gross level, that here for each of us are 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, things we think should be funded and/or dropped, then I think just those in note form would be very helpful to them certainly by Wednesday of next week, so you can incorporate that thinking in what you produce. And
Wednesday?
How
I know.
about Friday?
Friday, well, in theory, they've got to produce it Friday, but
Oh, yeah,
I
that's
think we
right.
can ignore the 31st,
Well-
can't we? It's a
What's-
Sunday.
Fridays,
The charter says by the 31st, so that could be tomorrow or midnight on
Oh.
the New Year's Eve.
31st is what, next?
Monday.
It is a Monday?
Yes.
Okay, so that won't work. Yeah, so Wednesday.
Plus, that's some
I know
serious
it's-
football time, too, so.
It's pretty tough timing. Pretty tough timing.
So as soon as we feel comfortable sending it to Lee, we should do so.
That would be very,
And please, before the end of next week. Want to settle on 5% as guidance?
I mean, I
5%.
think as Mary
You're
says.
saying take the 11.5 down to 5?
Down to 5.
Yep, I agree.
I mean, however we loosely interpret it, it's a
Where do you get
5%
the
increase in tax.
11.5, Jamie, I'm sorry.
I'm just looking at the expenditure.
Yeah, page 2, you can see the, yeah.
Oh, page 2. Oh, there we are, thank you.
if that's your wish, we'll use that as a goal or a target and see
I
how
would say
we
for the
can
moment,
shake it out.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I don't think there's any mistaking the direction in which we're headed, which is down, not up.
Well, it's a tough job for all of us, but it has to be.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Peter, got any thoughts you want to add to the?
No,
How do we
that's
shake out,
reasonable.
can I just ask generally, because I'm relatively new as well, how do we shake out on budget versus actuals? I mean, we say that we had a 5% budget increase year over year, but where do the actuals
I think the
reflect? I mean,
actuals,
we're halfway through the fiscal year now.
mhm.
How are we looking without derailing this conversation?
No, I think we're in good shape. Obviously, the big problem in the past has been the legal expenses for the last several years. But I think the departments pretty much give us good numbers and can stick to those, so.
Well, now, the legal expense issue has been replaced by the unknowns that are popping up over at the library in the same, create the same kind of problem.
I mean,
Well,
our
and
fund,
notice Peter's got a transfer from funds, so he's anticipating some amount.
Yeah.
And I think for the moment, we let that's a judgment of Peter's, which certainly we respect. But for the moment,
That's the surplus, right?
yeah, so
Yeah.
that's reflecting his belief in what's going to be available to replenish. And
Yeah.
I think from the first several stages, our attention ought to be on, most of our attention ought to be on expenditures. The grand list is half a
I
point.
mean, I guess
you
that's
know.
actually a good way to look at it.
Yeah,
Just that line item,
Yeah.
right?
yeah, yeah,
The transfer from funds line item is
Yeah.
sort of a good indicator of
yeah, exactly. And you can see
the year-end
the
actuals
increasing
are just
demand.
carried over,
You can see,
right?
yeah, you can see the
Year over
increasing
year.
demand, so, well, does that give you,
The other piece of the puzzle, of course, that you're all well aware of is, in some communities, the grand list is growing at a certain rate that helps support some of the increases that may be desired or needed. But the challenge of having a sizable grand list and not huge amounts of new development is that the grand list on a percentage basis
you know,
could hardly keep up with the growth
Yeah.
needed in expenses or debt. So
right.
if you had a small grand list and a couple big development projects, the grand list would grow percentage-wise dramatically, but we already have a large grand list, so even the new development coming online isn't raising that
Yeah.
in a significant
Right.
way.
Is Waycrossing online? I can't remember what we heard last week.
I
The new
believe-
apartments.
I believe that a portion of that is online, but for example, one of the new buildings was just recently occupied, so that may have shown up on the grand list as a partial construction, but it may not show up as fully built until the next grand list in, April 1 is when those get locked in, so it might show up as an ad for the year coming forward, but it doesn't show yet in its full capacity.
And we do get a estimate from Ted as to what he thinks it's going to be. This does not reflect that at this point, so that's one of the things we'll be looking at to get his best estimate of what he thinks it will be. And he's generally been very accurate in terms of
I'm
what
sorry,
we see.
Peter,
He's generally been pretty accurate in terms of projecting what he thinks the grand list will be for the next budget year.
Now, do we want to, I think we'd be responsible to respect yours and Peter's time in terms of individual questions we might have. For instance, about an item that we thought were important, rather than peppering you or what's your expectation? How do you want to handle?
I think if you have specific questions as you're thinking and churning through this, by all means, feel free to submit them and we'll do our best to answer them, or if at least as ideas come up, whether you want to package them all as a whole or more stream of consciousness as they come to mind so you don't forget about them or neglect to. So whatever's most convenient for you, and we'll keep track of all of your ideas, questions, and concerns, and then do our best to fashion this into a workable.
Fill Colleen in so she's up to speed and
Yep.
anticipating the first meeting. And
Yeah, the timing's tough for all of us, but we knew that going into
Yeah.
it, and we've already started earlier than.
well, we have the
sometimes.
benefit of an extraordinary piece of work, Peter. I mean,
Yeah,
really,
Peter's done a lot of heavy lifting on this. and
Can't-
I'm very grateful for
can't
his work.
express enough compliment. I mean, so we have that benefit.
Can I ask you, Lee, do you think it's, and Peter, I guess I'd ask you too, do you think, I have no experience with this, and is it doable to reduce this down without cutting back on any essential services, or what's your prognosis of the ability to carve without impacting the town in a material way? And I don't know, I have no clue.
It's going to be a hard lift.
Okay.
Most departments would be asking the question as you are and responding.
Yeah.
Because it's not like everybody came in with wild-eyed dream requests. We had put the message out early that, not that it's ever been an easy tax year in any town, but, we asked department heads at the outset to be very cautious in their projected budget. So it's not like everybody came in with every possible project under the sun and it's easy, it's going to be easy. It's not going to be easy.
No, and it isn't always fair to identify things like new mowers. I mean, we don't want to go down the list and pick out everything that's got five digits. Because sometimes 3 digits times 10 add up to be,
Point well taken.
Yeah, and, but I think the message, if there needs to be one from us to Lee, it seems pretty clear that we think by half, this is acceptable as a starting point, and some serious cutting is in style. Yeah. Anybody, any other question, just, Tom?
Tom Tompkins, Falls Road. I'm a little concerned that our voters approved the bond for the new library and town center project, which was sure to increase taxes, but yet here we are trying to lower them, and so I kind of wonder if that's sending the wrong message. Next time we have a big project bond come up for a vote, people might say, great, let's go for it, because we only increased taxes by 5% getting the library and town center, and, gee, it increased by that much the previous year or whatever. The other idea I had, I know you were trying to settle on a percentage. One thing you could do is take what the normal increase would be, and I'm going to say 5%, and figure out what your percentage by which the bond passed was, and I'm going to say it was 60 to 40. I have no idea what it was. And then say, okay, let's take, what the library bond increase is, take 60% of that, add it on to the 5% increase, and then see what you come out with for a percentage. And I would think that would be fair, because it would, it wouldn't be a full increase, but then again, it would support those who would approve the bond.
I guess the question, Tom, I have in that is that, if you're choosing that 5% as an increase, as Mary came up with the line that, which I've now lost, I mean, our increases, I mean, in years past, our increases have been more in the 1, 2, 3% increase, so.
Which is kind of odd, because I always figure that the cost of living increase is always 3%. So anything below that I get a little suspicious about. But again, it could be deferred maintenance, or we're putting things off that we really shouldn't be, but we're doing it just to keep the tax rate low.
Right,
I know
right.
our former chair, Gary, was very proud one time. He was saying, well, we kept the tax rate low for you. And I think that was the 1.8 or 1.9% here or something. We appreciate that, but if it's going to cause problems in the long run, maybe, you gotta question it.
Right, and that's a good point, and that's the point I've been before, is that the whole idea of deferred maintenance tends to shoot you in the foot sometimes.
And some of those percentages, we don't know all the facts. There could have been a big rise in the grand list in a
Yeah.
particular year that offset what might have otherwise been a higher number. So these things play off of each other in peculiar ways.
Plus, we're making some serious investments in fire equipment and the town center, and I think that's a really entertaining idea, Tom, about, but we will approach this as a whole, and rather than expect it's going to pivot on any one particular expense or not. One of the more meaningful pieces here is no increase in PC insurance. When you think about it, some of those things cross. So what we're essentially going to do is find monies from requests. There's no other way to find it. And that's true budgeting. That's making choices based on allocating what funds you have, not a total to be just divine somehow. And it may be we end up 4, we end up 6 somewhere, but I think we serve best by scrutinizing virtually every expenditure to the point of deciding what can be delayed, if any, what can be done without, and what can be done with less. And that I'm confident that process from this point will be what we'll follow, and it will reward us with a pretty tight, scrutinized, and responsible budget. So.
May I ask a question of
Yeah.
Peter real quick? And I do realize it's getting late, and I have, some part of me wishes to move into executive session at this hour in keeping with our new record. But,
The Josh factor.
Peter, I'm looking at page 2 of the budget that we received, that you prepared, that we discussed last week. And you've got the grand list at 15,344,000 and change, yeah?
Mhm.
But Ted has it at significantly higher. He has it at 15,673,000 in the documents that he gave us, and that would be a significant increase between your number and his. Is the number he gave us, do you think? And I don't know if you have it in front of you, Peter, in
It must
fairness.
be 0.9%, Peter, or something.
So that's another 300,000. And I'm just wondering if how much of a difference that would make in your overall numbers. Probably not a huge difference,
It'll make a
but,
difference, but, I mean, his number came in after we had. put
yeah,
this in,
yes,
so-
exactly right, yes. He handed it to us at our meeting on,
Right, and we'll ask him again, before we finalize this to
All
the
right.
board, what is.
so it'll make a difference, but not enough to,
Not a huge
okay,
amount.
thanks. All right.
Any other questions? Any other comments? It'll be a subject we'll spend quite a bit of time on. All set? Do you have guidance, you?
Thank you. It would be helpful to have a motion to warn the budget public hearing for January 15, 2019. That's the date we have contemplated in the budget calendar. I know we don't have that document yet, but you will have it delivered to you by charter by the end of the year.
I think I
So
heard.
moved? Do you want me to?
Mary moves. Josh seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. Ayes have it.
And just for you want us by Wednesday, the day after Christmas, to get our comments, our trimming.
Yes. And
Just so
and
I'm
in
clear.
the briefest, you know.
So if we think that things that are in here are okay, we don't.
Yeah, I
we
just
don't-
focus on what we felt should be considered strongly
For increases and
for
decreases.
increases and decreases, just by item name, not.
Okay.
And maybe if you want to add some dollars
Sure.
to it, just
Yeah.
so they have the benefit of where, of what they might expect in the way of further questioning or even preferences down the road.
That would be very helpful,
Okay,
I know it's
tomorrow.
tough.
Well, I know Peter never goes home, so it shouldn't be a problem reaching him on Christmas Day.
I keep encouraging him to go home at night and weekends.
Okay?
Yep.
We'll figure it out.
The next item is an executive session pursuant to 1 Vermont Statutes annotated 313 to consider the negotiating or securing of real estate purchase or lease options. And we generally have 2 motions to initiate this. We would invite the town manager, the chief and deputy chief of the fire department, and anyone else?
Well, I think it would be
Peter?
helpful to have Peter in
Yep.
there, and if Jacob shows up, rescue chief.
Okay. So are there the first of 2 motions to that effect?
Yep. Move to fund the premature public knowledge of negotiating or securing of real estate purchase or lease options would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Discussion? Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Get a second on that?
I think Mary did.
Okay, good. Move to enter executive session pursuant to 1 VSA 313-2 to discuss negotiating or securing of real estate purchase or lease options, and invite the town manager, fire chief, rescue chief, and finance director to the executive session.
Seconded?
And deputy fire chief, apologies.
Will someone, would someone mind shooing Jacob in when he comes? Should he come and we're next door? Any,
I second it.
any discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. Thank you. Is there a motion to exit executive session and resume general session? Josh moves.
Second?
Mary seconds. Any discussion? Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I don't want to make any statement about
No,
what.
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Mary moved, Jamie seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. We thank you, and we thank everybody for...